Hello everyone, my name is Yanti Wirajuda and welcome to my vlog, Total Diplomacy. In today's episode, I interviewed Ibu Yuyun Wahyuningrum, representative of Indonesia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR, for the 2019-2021 period. She is also a well-known Indonesian human rights defender. In the interview, we discussed the role of AICHR in promoting and protecting human rights in ASEAN, the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak upon a number of rights guaranteed by the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, the importance of promoting and protecting human rights while combating COVID-19 pandemic, as well as other human rights issues. Thank you, Ibu Yuyun, for letting me interview you, and to all the viewers, don't forget to watch the interview in full. Hello! Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my vlog, Total Diplomacy. I'm very honored to have with us here today Ibu Yuyun Wahyuningrum, representative of Indonesia to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. How are you, Ibu Yuyun?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Thank you so much for your... I am good, Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for your willingness to be interviewed by me and to appear on this blog on Total Diplomacy, in which we seek to invite the various stakeholders and to discuss various international issues in order to promote Indonesia's interests. If I may, could you kindly describe what led you to become a human rights activist?
Well, perhaps it was started with the 1998 riot. I was on the street. I saw a number of different views that I used to see. I live in a military compound, so it's rather secured and everything is guarded. And I think in May 1998, I saw different views and different kind of Jakarta, and through television, I also know that number of riot also happening in different parts of the countries. And since then, I realized that there's something that need to be addressed, social injustices, and that's and then the number of protests coming from the women's groups, and so many students took the street, and then my curiosity started to grow, and I look for more information. I work in the National Commission on Child Rights, and that's how I started to engage with international law on human rights. Started with the Convention on the Right of the Child, and then after that I went to the CEDAW on women and children, and then grew up from these two conventions to understand more and more situation and more conventions. And then I took MA on human rights. So that's how it was started.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. It's indeed very interesting, your experience, and thank you for sharing what led you to become a human rights activist. Turning to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, could you briefly describe AICHR? Could you briefly describe the role of AICHR and efforts that it has made to promote and protect human rights? I'd also like to seek your views if you think AICHR has fully implemented its mandate ever since it was established in 2009.
So AICHR was established on 23rd of October 2009. I was still part of civil society. I was in Bangkok. I was with Forum Asia, and then So this is something that there's a connection between what the story I mentioned earlier about a reform, because there was also a bureaucracy reform in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So when I was civil society working in Bangkok, interestingly, we received more information. We engage more with the governments of ASEAN through the government of Indonesia. So it was the government of Indonesia willing to listen to our concerns, to receive all the comments, and then integrated our inputs into it. And we felt that we are respected, our voices were heard. And so since then, I see there was a bureaucracy reform in this particular ministry. And so in 2009, in July, I was there in Dusit Thani Hotel when Thailand introduced this ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. I was not surprised with the additional word of intergovernmental, because in the evening I was already informed by diplomats by one of the negotiators from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But at the same time, I was also informed about what to do after this. And I was very proud to hear that our diplomats, our negotiators said, because Indonesian civil society wanted to have a stronger regional human rights mechanism, this is what we are going to do. Number one, we are going to accept intergovernmental word into the text, into the name, but we are going to ask for political declaration. And then in that time, the negotiator asked me what should be in the political declaration, and I gave a lot of inputs. And then in the end of the document, it was included, like for instance, to balance between promotion and protection, and then to review of the TOR, to ensure that all government in the region secure the funds for the mechanism, so the mechanism will not run out of the money, because that's what happened with the number of regional mechanism and international mechanism and national mechanism. When they depend too much from the state budget, but state will have control over what whether they want to or not want to contribute to the mechanism. So the declaration has included our inputs that all governments have to make sure that the finance fulfill or met. So that's in 2009. I was when it was launched. I was also there in October 2009. I was there and launched the body, even though it was not an ideal organization, but I was very touched. I was crying because I was not expecting that going to be happening in this region, given the diverse political situation and regime in the region. But also in the time, I gradually put the trust back to the government. Because I grew up under the dictatorship, so authoritarianism. So even though my parents coming from military background, but still, what I saw on May 1998 really changed the way I see things. And then, but during that process, I developed or I regained trust to the government, and I see there are different kind of engagement before reform and after the reform. Before reform, it was always confrontation, but after reform, it's more on partnership. It doesn't mean that we always have a good agreement, or we should agree on many things. I was very amazed that our diplomats from Ministry of Foreign Affairs accepted different ideas, even though they didn't agree with me, and I don't agree with it. But we continue talking, and that's something that I appreciated in that time. So I regained my trust. And so since then, I continue to monitor the work of AICHR. I continue to be the a critics to the AICHR and ASEAN in general. But at the same time, I also express the interest of engagement. So it means that my criticism is for engaging. My criticism is for a betterment of the body. It is not that I have something or sentiment to the individual or the institution, but rather we want to see the body better. So that's, I engage more and more, and then after 10 years, my civil societies asked me to apply for this job, and then I applied, and now I'm in the system. I have a different ideas of looking at AICHR. So I was civil society, and then I was a scholar, and then now I'm in the system. So these kind of experiences and role provided me with different kind of understanding about how ASEAN work, how human rights diplomacy also work. Now inside AICHR, I saw the AICHR has evolved from day one until now. So for instance, we just finished our 5-year work plan 2021-2025, and before Indonesia provided inputs to that 5-year work plan, we put all together the previous 5-year work plan, and I see that in the beginning, in the first 5 years, AICHR did not mention about issues of human rights at all in the 5-year work plan. The second 5-year work plan, they mentioned about around 5 or 6. It means there is different way of seeing issues. And then now we have the third 5-year work plan will be implemented by 2021. We have a long list of human rights issues. So from this example, we saw that AICHR, the member states, already felt comfortable with mentioning issues. But I think there is also a contribution from ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. So before ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, it was very difficult for the AICHR representative to mention about issues. But after ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, like myself now, when I want to talk about freedom of religion belief, which is very sensitive in the region, I can mention that this topic is actually based on the Article 22 of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, and no one actually can question that. Member state can question about the focus of the freedom of religion belief, the selection of activity, but not the issue itself. So I think in many ways AICHR has evolved. Like the practice, AICHR has evolved gradually, step by step, together. That is why, because they step together, so it's slower. And another one is on because AICHR has been complained about not having protection mandate. It's actually only one, which is to obtain information from member state upon request. So, but this particular mandate was not necessarily implemented yet. It was very difficult to get consensus among member states to move forward with this, even though in 2013, Indonesia initiated this human rights dialogue, in which Indonesia presented itself to to explain this is what happened in Indonesia after 1998 until 2013, and then invited questions from member states, and member states were very awkward because it was not they are not used to question on human rights compliant to other countries. But Indonesia, I think, opened up, and I think that's exactly the role of Indonesia as the most stable democratic country in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, to push the boundaries, to break the rule in ASEAN, and to create a new breakthrough practices in ASEAN. So that's this number of practices actually lead me as AICHR representative from Indonesia now to pick difficult issues. Second, to break through, to be able to introduce new practices, and also create number of possibilities. So when in my first meeting in 2019, I immediately put 4 standing agenda in the meeting of AICHR. Number 1 is on complaint mechanism. Number 2 on stakeholder engagement. Number 3, I always do not remember this two. But now we completed all. So in the last meeting, we just had a meeting with the national human rights institutions. In the last 10 years, AICHR has rejected to meet with national human institution, but now it's there. It's already implemented. Even the national human rights institution was very surprised that they can have a meeting with AICHR. And so they said, we have been waiting for this for 10 years, and only now that we can have a formal meeting with AICHR. But yeah, that's how Indonesia very loyal to the ideas. In 2009, we have number of things that we agreed, myself and the governments in that time agreed on a number of things that we might become the practice of ASEAN. And then in November 2019, we just agreed to come up with a complaint mechanism in AICHR. We call it 3 steps complaint mechanism, which means now AICHR can recognize the complaints, and then ASEAN Secretariat will respond to the organization who sent the complaints officially, and then ASEAN Secretariat will be submitting the cases to the country, respective country. So now 1 step is already open, which AICHR agreed to accept, to recognize, and to take further step to address the complaint. So that's Indonesia's agenda. So I was very loyal with what I have agreed with Indonesian government in 2009. Only now that we can implement all of them, but again, this cannot be done or without what the previous representative has established. So they actually provide a platform and foundation in which this idea can be accepted, can be implemented. On your question whether AICHR has implemented the mandates, not yet, not fully, because like I said, mentioned earlier, on the obtaining information from member states, that is not yet implemented. It was introduced by Indonesia, but it was seen as the initiative from Indonesia, not as the AICHR. But that's exactly what Indonesia wanted to do, to introduce practice, to say that that's okay, we can do this. No one will get hurt by asking question about human rights situation in other countries. Member countries have used to this kind of practice in the UN, in Geneva. Why not in in the family. So I think I see AICHR evolve, but to be able for AICHR to evolve, AICHR need Indonesia to continue to push the envelope, to continue to set the practice or dare enough to introduce some radical thinking. I mean, radical in the context of ASEAN in terms of protection of human rights.
Oh, thank you very much. It's really amazing if we see the evolution of AICHR from 2009 up till now. And there are many initiatives, mechanisms that we didn't think could be possible back in 2009, and now it's been achieved, like meeting with the national human rights institutions, and also what you mentioned earlier about the mechanisms. I'm really happy to see the progress, from 2009 and up till now. And like you mentioned, it's the work of your predecessors as well as yourself in paving the way. And Indonesia truly shows its leadership in human rights issues in ASEAN. You mentioned earlier about the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. I remember I was in Phnom Penh in 2012 when that was adopted. That was a very touching moment, that ASEAN was finally able to have its very own human rights declaration. In relation to the declaration and the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, could you describe the impact of the pandemic on some of the human rights guaranteed in the declaration? Has it had any severe impact, and is there difficulty in promoting and protecting human rights while all the same combating the pandemic? Because sometimes there might be, a dilemma between those two efforts.
Yes, we saw and observed that the COVID-19 has created a situation in which human rights enjoyment cannot be fulfilled. And also the responses to COVID-19 also has impact to the enjoyment of human rights. The restriction of movement, for instance, has created a lot of issues and problems. People cannot go to work, people cannot go to school, so it means that our rights to education, our rights to healthcare, our rights to work, and our rights to a number of things actually had been compromised. Whether it can be done, yes, it actually allowed international human rights law allowed the restriction to the freedoms happen, as mentioned in the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. But of course, there are a number of restrictions requirements for restricting the freedoms. In terms of the implication, for instance, a number of people, and we actually monitored the impact of this COVID-19 to victims. Number of organizations documented that there was an increase of domestic violence because people stay at home and they are not used to and created a lot of anxieties because of the death and the situation during COVID-19. But at the same time, shelters were closed. In the beginning of COVID, were closed, and then their budget has been reallocated for COVID-19 recovery or treatment, and then people cannot go out because of restrictive movement. So number of women has to take care of themselves at home while they are actually battered. They are actually hit by the family members. And trafficking person, for instance, did not stop just because COVID-19, especially those who are already in the circle of the transnational organized crime. They were confined in the place, a closed place, they cannot go out. If they run away, no one actually on the street. So it's created a lot of vulnerabilities for them. Person with disabilities also in the beginning were feeling that they've been left out because all the information are provided without the support of sign languages. 3 countries in the region also apply state of emergency with the law. So I checked these three laws. It's actually allow state to violate certain rights because of COVID, or state were allowed to arrest someone when the person assumed to make a public unpleased. So it creates people feeling fear by having that kind of statement. So the apparatus can arrest that person. So it means that actually the violation or the violation of freedom of rights were actually legalized by this law. But of course, state of emergency should only be imposed temporarily, cannot be forever. So now I think so Thailand initially has 1 month and then extended another 1 month, another 1 month, another 1 month. Philippines imposed state of emergency for 6 months, and Cambodia imposed 9 months. So Cambodia still having state of emergency situation right now. A state of emergency actually created more power to the executive. So there is a lack of check and balance when the executive has more power than judiciary or legislative. So that's how we found in terms of human rights impact. Even the statement of ASEAN leaders also recognize that COVID-19 is not only health crisis or economic crisis, but also human rights crisis. So we are actually quite happy and welcome. AICHR welcome this kind of statement coming from the ASEAN leaders. And AICHR also participated in the development of ASEAN ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework by putting number of activities addressing the very issues in COVID-19, such as right to education, right to health, migration, human rights and technology, business and human rights, and rights for vulnerable groups. So we and also our press statement on 1st May recognize the problems of human rights during COVID-19 and call for ASEAN member states to put human rights at the heart of the crisis responses.
That's very interesting. So I was interested in what you mentioned earlier about domestic rights. Domestic abuse. So in other words, could it be said that women during the pandemic, women endure more human rights abuses compared to men?
Yes, that's what UN Women also found. A number of women organizations also prove women receive more violation, not only at home, but also as a migrant workers. I receive a lot of stories from migrant workers, Indonesian migrant workers in Hong Kong, in Saudi Arabia, in Malaysia. They have to work like longer than before because their employers are in home. So they have to work double without additional money because the employer said, look, we don't go to work, so we cannot have additional money to pay you. So and some of them also was in limbo. So for instance, their contract is already end, but because of the lockdown, so they cannot leave the country, they cannot go anywhere. So they have to stuck in the employer house, or they have to find another place. So for women, that's very difficult because they have different needs. And so many scholars also mention about unpaid job, uh, double burden. Double burden is not only for migrant workers, but also by the wives, by the mothers, because now mothers have to be teachers, cook, clean the house, and do everything heavier than used to, and without any pay, and they continue to be the staff of, or the worker of the companies, or the office. They have to attend meeting, they have to carry all the tasks from the office. So it's really UN Women said that women have not only double burden, but triple or maybe fourth. What is the fourth? Well, more burden than men during COVID-19.
That is true, and you what you mentioned really, I can really relate to what you mentioned. I have 3 kids, and I have to teach them and work and all that. It's not always easy. I think for all the women in the world, this pandemic really hits us hard. And last but definitely not least, moving forward, what do you think could be done to improve and enhance the work of AICHR? And what are your personal hopes and dreams for AICHR to achieve?
So AICHR first need to make sure that the review of the TOR will be done, because it's overdue. It's supposed to be done in 2014, but now foreign ministers had agreed for the review and has tasked SOM, and SOM also has created the panel of experts. So we hope that at least they can work either next year or the year after, but for the purpose of compliance with the TOR that AICHR, or that ASEAN member state have created before, the review need to be implemented. Whether or not the review will come up with something that changed the current AICHR, that's another matter. But as a process, the review need to be done. For now, I saw number of violation or breach in terms of the implementation of the TOR. So for instance, in the TOR, TOR does not provide that AICHR representative has alternate, but now more and more representative has alternate. Second, there is one country that has not even appointed representative, and this is already a second year of the current batch. So the person is still temporary. So she's not the AICHR representative. So there are a number of breaches of the TOR. So it means perhaps the current TOR does not work. Therefore, there is a need to have a review. So with this kind of review, then we can see what things that works for member state. So we can reduce and maximize this kind of deviant behavior in implementing the TOR. And then so the review need to be implemented for the next step for AICHR. Second, since AICHR has this 5-year work plan, which very ambitious, so it means that AICHR has to implement this 5-year work plan. And the third, this is something that we in the ASEAN political security in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs we discussed, that we need to revive this human rights dialogue like what we did in 2013. to introduce the practice of questioning each other about human rights. And then when we try to establish practice, of course we should do it regularly, repeatedly, because practice only can be established by a repetitive or routine act, cannot be only once one in a time. And number four is AICHR need to address some difficult issues like migrant workers. The one that has AICHR has not been able to address migrant workers in the comfort level. So we continue to have a dialogue during the AICHR meeting, and now Indonesia is having the research on the migrant workers. But we saw members that are very uncomfortable whenever we talk about migrant workers. While Indonesia has a lot of interest on this issue, so for the next step for AICHR is Indonesia need to continue to introduce difficult issues, how difficult it was, but Indonesia has this particular task, different from other member states, but Indonesia has a different task because Indonesia is still the only stable democracy in the region. So Indonesia need to take a lead, and Indonesia should not shy away from being a leader in ASEAN and also on human rights. Despite the fact we have also problems in our country, but who doesn't? All countries have a problems. I think the most important thing here is how state to respond. It is wrong when the state does not respond on human rights violation or human rights problem. If the state still express the willingness and respond the issues, that's actually can it means that the countries have still having good engagement or good intention to engage with international law and protecting their citizen. My personal dream actually to see AICHR to be credible and independent human rights mechanism. But of course, this is a long-term. This is very long-term goal. But of course, the long-term goal cannot be achieved without steps that we are taking now. So that is how I have been working so far. Either I was civil society or scholar, and now inside the system is whatever we take as a step now is not wasted. It is building up to what we are actually trying to achieve in the future.
Wow, that was, I really, was very happy to hear your views. And you raised a very, very important point earlier, that Indonesia should not shy away from its leadership in human rights, and that it is a fact that countries, have human rights problems and violations here and there, but what's important is that there is a willingness to address them and to engage, between government and civil society. That's the key to advancing human rights, and that even though AICHR seems to be moving in a slightly slow manner, but that's the way to proceed in order to attain a credible and independent AICHR in the future. So thank you again, Bu Yuyun. I really, really appreciate and really thank you for your willingness to appear on my blog. If it were up to me, I would continue talking with you for many, many hours, because you're such a very wonderful person. You have so many views and perspectives that I would like to discuss this, but unfortunately due to time constraints we can only end here. But thank you again, I wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors, and in carrying out your undoubtedly very, very difficult task as representative of Indonesia to AICHR. And thank you again, and all the best to you.
Okay. Bye bye. Good luck.
Bye.